Good evening, folks. This is the continuation episode of
Our
uh
Skinwalker Ranch special, I guess.
yes. So to recap from last week, basically, Skinwalker Ranch is an area of extreme paranormal activity, and while that might be the pinnacle of its strangeness, that exact area, it's actually in an area called the Utah Basin, which in itself is an area that's a hot spot for paranormal activity. So last week we talked about what the skinwalkers are, where it comes from, with the Native Indians, the Navajos, and of course
The Ute.
the Ute, and all the a fair amount of experiences that have happened on the ranch. So if you missed that and you need some perspective or some reference points, I suggest you go back and listen to that first. That said, let's continue on, Ryan. So we were getting to the NIDS team.
Well, in 1996, Mr. Sherman, he had pretty much had enough. His livestock were disappearing. His family was being terrorized. I believe we covered some of the events that led up to, basically him going public, which, was a big deal because this guy was he's a very private man, which was the whole reason they had moved out to Utah, and basically was driven to the point where he was forced to go public to try to get some resolution to this. And I guess the ultimate result was they popped up on the radar of a lot of different UFO groups, but I guess the Robert Bigelow, the owner of the organization known as NIDS, the National
National,
Institute of Discovery Science, I believe, NIDS.
and it's kind of a cool thing to mention that this was a team of scientists put together for paranormal research. That's not a very common thing, right? Like that's I mean, would it be fair to ascertain that it's
Well, when you're dealing
what
with any type of anomalous research, UFO research, research in the paranormal, cryptozoology, any of these fields, what the scientists you see are often marginalized in
they're
their
shunned?
fields. They're shunned. It's considered professional suicide for serious biologists to seek out Bigfoot, or physicists to try to determine the true nature of psychic phenomenon, or ghosts or other paranormal activity. These are areas that are, unfortunately in this day and age, science has established itself almost as a religion, and it has a certain dictates, certain commandments that it follows, and anyone who moves outside of that is excommunicated from the Church of Science. Not to be confused with the Church of Scientology.
Yeah.
So to continue, we have an unprecedented situation with NIDS being funded by millionaire Robert Bigelow.
He's rich. This
He owns casinos. He owns and operates an aerospace industry, and interestingly enough, has become very involved with the paranormal UFO side of things as well, as we'll get into a little later. So in 1996, the NIDS team, Robert Bigelow acquires the ranch, buys the ranch from Terry Sherman, and they begin to set up operations to study this phenomenon, as it's been, all the information they have is merely anecdotal. A few, photographs of, a light in the sky. Nothing that can really be, said to be scientifically quantifiable. So the NIDS team come in and actually set up a command center.
Now they worked with Terry even after they bought the ranch, if I'm correct.
Yes, well, Terry was kept on as a, at first he still had livestock on the ranch. Eventually, he moved his livestock and everything off the ranch, and he was um, kept on by NIDS as a, as a ranch hand and an advisor, kind of to maintain the property. And I guess at this point, Terry was, more or less, he had gotten to the point where, he wanted to find out what this was. Like this was, I guess, more so from Terry's perspective, had almost turned into it was a personal affair.
Yeah,
This
well,
was
you're talking about
something.
a yeah. This is a guy that never believed in anything like this, and then it's such a shocking experience that I mean he upped his family, his business, and moved out of there. So I mean you can't really get much more personal than that.
Well, exactly. I mean, there. Of course, I guess some of the final breaking events, I guess, came to a head with the disappearance and mutilation of some of his most prized livestock, and eventually with the killing of several of his you know
His
family
dogs.
pets, the dogs. One night, he had let the dogs loose on a blue orb. Now, blue and red orbs and white orbs were common sights on the ranch. They would fly around and follow them around the ranch. Um, in on this particular occasion, Terry just had enough, let the dogs loose. It played kind of a cat and mouse game with the dogs.
Lured it into the tree line, and
Yep,
then
lured them into a small copse of trees, and there was a flash and a horrible sound of squealing dogs, and he didn't go and check until the next morning.
and
He
he
waited. His dogs never came out. He went the next morning and checked and found the his dogs had been burned to ashes, basically.
yeah, I remember them being described as like just gray mush,
Yeah,
and it was like in three circular, like each dog, I believe there's like three circular burned scorch marks into the grass, and in the center of each one was like this gray, just slop that was his dog's.
exactly. So to put a little perspective, these were the events that really drew the NIDS team in, I guess, and they set up for long-term observation of the ranch. Initially, they set up a few cameras. They brought in lots of different equipment, spectrometers, which are used to break down the different wavelengths of light. So you could take a picture of a light in the sky, and then you could feed it into the spectrometer, and it would break down the individual wavelengths of light, and then analyzing those against known analogs that we have databases of headlights. So you can take a picture of a headlight from with a telescope from a mile away, and run that through a computer, and it could probably tell you what kind of light bulbs or what type of car that is, just because we do have databases of the different
So
spectrographic wavelengths
basically
analysis.
a profile for different lights.
Exactly, it's we have a fingerprint database that we can use, and so they deployed all this night vision technology, thermal vision, and basically began staking out the ranch. Now, the events that are described, as being the official events by NIDS. I guess the most detailed version of that we have is in the book. Hunt for the Skinwalker. And I guess it's worth mentioning that with any type of organization, obviously, as intelligent, thinking, logical human beings, we can assume that this NIDS organization has its own agenda. It has its own outline for what it wants to achieve and how it wants to achieve it. And there's an individual, Robert Bigelow, who funds this organization, and he obviously has his own agendas and reasons that he wants to do this. So, I guess we can preface this whole next section by saying that the information that we have is probably skewed and biased in the way of the the views and beliefs of the NIDS organization, and is not necessarily a complete picture of everything that happened on the ranch.
Well, I actually, if I remember correctly, they themselves have a couple of YouTube videos talking about the actual book, and they even mentioned some things in that were not in the book.
Yes, in particular, I believe the Coast to Coast AM interview that they do with George Knapp, and I believe Colm Keller is involved in that as well.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Most of the events that they actually talked about in the interview, I think the majority of the things we talked about in the interview as actual events weren't weren't covered in the book at all. So
And that surprised me because, I mean, it also makes me think of what else do we not know that they know.
well, if you take it from if you take right out of the book, well, the sense that we get is that over the 6 years that NIDS were there, they seen anomalous lights. They had a few strange encounters, but it seemed like that the events were greatly minimized, according to their story, that the weirdness ramped down over the 6 years that they after they have moved on to the ranch. And then you have these interviews, and I believe there's more than one. Now, I'm only very familiar with the one, but I believe in both the interviews they talk about other events that weren't in the book. So we have, that had occurred while the NIDS team were there. I guess, to really get going here. I guess the first really big event was a cattle mutilation, and that's what characterized, I guess, the beginning of the strange activity. And we have daylight mutilations where people are nearby. There were
We're talking a
no
matter of like 10 minutes ago, you've seen an animal perfectly fine.
perfectly
And
healthy, and then you come back and it's literally been dismembered. It's been ensanguinated, drained of blood. It's been disemboweled. It's had an anal core removed, which, I mean, it sounds bizarre, but the whole digestive system, the digestive tract, right from the anus to the stomach, you have a lot of what's called undifferentiated cells. And if you want to take samples of something, taking the actual digestive system tissue is actually one of the best the best samples that you can take, because undifferentiated cells aren't as specialized as say skin cells or eye cells or heart cells or liver cells. um, and I guess there's any number of reasons why you'd want to take that particular part of the animal. And I don't think that animal mutilation has ever been explained in a very satisfactory way, because it's such at the same time, it is a brutal, yet very deliberate and meticulous activity.
so when we're saying that, uh, it's basically a more generic type of cell. I mean, is that kind of what you're getting at?
Well, not so much the way in generic as undifferentiated in the way that it's not overly specialized to to one task. Obviously, stomach cells are specific to the stomach. However, in terms of cell morphology, it's well, I guess you could say it would have a more general structure.
So, but it's not anything like a stem cell.
No, I mean stem cells. We do find that the eyes are removed in a lot of cattle mutilations, and I think that the word mutilation is a very it's a misnomer. Because these
Well, we're talking about a very specific, like master surgeon, like carved out corpse.
exactly it's never characteristic of a mutilation. It's more like a exploratory autopsy. It's more akin to something that we would do to a unknown creature that we came
We wanted to
across.
study. Yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of times in these cases, you see that the eyes are removed, which you mentioned stem cells. We do know that that stem cells, we do find stem cells in the human eye. That can be well in eyes in the animal kingdom. I know at least in mammals you can recover stem cells from an eye, and in a lot of cases we do see this. Very very precise slices taken out of ears, lips, nostrils,
Tongues.
and complete patches of the facial skin removed, with muscle and fatty tissue left completely undamaged underneath. Sometimes it's taken right to the bone, and the bone is clean and completely devoid of tissue. So like you said, we're dealing with an extremely specific, very skilled surgical procedure, not a mutilation, which would indicate, like something that's
Something
been
was having
butchered.
fun just butchering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that is not. I think, and personally, I think that all the stories of satanic cults. I think that the propensity for people to blame animal butcherings, like animal mutilations, in the past on cults was because of that extremely deliberate and human-like.
Massacring of an animal.
Well, yeah, the way that it was such a deliberate removal of tissue and skin and flesh and organs, and always characterized with the entire area is devoid of any signs of struggle or blood. So both times, actually, NIDS had been away from the property and been called within, I believe, 24 hours or less, and they have flown in from Las Vegas to Utah, landed at the ranch. They took samples. They had veterinarians on site, and then we get into this whole strangeness with the veterinarians. We have two different veterinarians on site in this particular instance. They're looking at the animal. The less senior veterinarian looks at the animal, makes a determination that this was a deliberate act by some person or persons using surgical techniques and technology to remove blood, tissue samples, and parts of the animal for whatever purpose. Who was then immediately overruled by the senior vet who was on the scene, who said that it was obviously a coyote attack of some sort, which did cause some contention amongst the group. And
I don't understand how you could even come to the conclusion that it was an animal. just based on very very specific, and like almost to the point where us humans can't surgically remove, to the perfection that some of these cattle were dismembered.
Well, some of the situations are obviously very suspect because you have mutilations happening in a small, very short periods of time, 10, 15, 20 minutes. Some of them happen during the height of very powerful storms. Um, I've never personally experienced Utah storms, but for anyone who has, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. I've read that they're quite intense. And for someone to perform that kind of a delicate activity under that type of time constraint, in that kind of a situation, is it falls almost outside of the realm of human capabilities. Now, what we're dealing, you bring up an interesting point. How could somebody make a determination that into a parallel conspiracy of its own, where historically, at least over the last 20 years, if you look at the cattle mutilation phenomenon, and I mean, we could do an entire week long podcast on just cattle mutilations themselves. But you consistently see the head of veterinary associations, basically, I guess would be like the Surgeon General for vets. Consistently, these groups move in. Vets who are always going after cattle mutilations, trying to figure this stuff out. They are ostracized, just like the scientific community. They are pushed off. Anybody who says that it's not a coyote attack gets marginalized. That there's an obvious conspiracy of at least there is a group within
Well, that's
the organization of vets in the United States and Canada, in North America, I guess I should say, that at least this small special interest group seems hell bent on either dissuading anyone from exploring what cattle mutilation is, and systematically covering up and quieting down anyone who starts kicking up a fuss over this in a professional.
well that's exactly my thoughts. And of course, what was the name of that cryptic animal? It was like a Chicupa Nibre or something like that. It was like almost like a dog, but it drank the blood of.
Chupacabra, El Chupacabra.
Yeah, yeah, probably. I can't remember the exact pronunciation, but anyway, they found it, right? They found the damn thing, and like, here was this myth for forever, and they find it. They put his picture in the news, and it's like, yeah, it could be like a slightly altered genetic version of a dog or something like that. But the point is that it was still something different. I mean, when we say like we found a strange animal or something like that, I mean, that's not to say like we're not saying it's a magical animal that came from space. We're just saying it's not normal. But people have this tendency to
Immediately apply the mystical qualities.
yeah, and not only that though, but as soon as you do that, I mean, you can't even talk about it on a level ground, because as soon as it's not a normal dog or it's not whatever, you got all these scientists and stuff, already kind of
Oh,
blasphemizing.
it's a dog with mange. It's a raccoon with rabies. It's a cross between a coyote and a dog. Or
Yeah, and like, but no matter how you put it, this thing drank the blood of animals, and that's that was the myth, and here we are, today, and it's like, yeah, it's been in the news. Everybody knows about it. Nobody really cares. Whatever. So when we have a case like as we're talking about now with cattle mutilations and stuff like that, it's just surprising that people are still, in the scientific community, so quick to just jump on it and be like, nope, it's not anything strange. It's obviously just suffering from, it got the cold, and this is what happens when you get the cold this time of year, and you fall apart like that. Like they always have some kind of cockamamie ways to describe it when it almost treats the public like we're all stupid, right? Because like I said, like it doesn't matter how you look at it, you're talking about an animal that's carved up in a way that us humans probably couldn't do, and we much less couldn't do. I mean, you think about complex surgeries, how are they done, or autopsies or whatever. They're done, it usually takes hours, and they do it under the best circumstances. You're talking under lights, very powerful lights, experienced surgeons with the most technical equipment. And now we're saying that, yeah, this animal was sliced and diced in 15 minutes in the middle of a storm at night, right? So,
I mean, what you're dealing with is events that are outside of, so far outside of our common everyday normal lives, that it's easier to double think it away by, you see an event, you establish that it did happen, and then you proceed to think it away, double, what was called double think it away, where it exists but it doesn't exist at the same time. And it just doesn't jive with your normal everyday view. So throughout NIDS research, they were able to determine with the cattle mutilation, after taking samples of a very fresh one, that the edges of some of the wounds had been cut with a surgical instrument. That by looking specifically at the wounds themselves, that they were cut with precision. And now, other research done into cattle mutilation, I'm to understand, has shown that under a microscope, it appears that not even the cells are sliced. That whatever device that is being used is able to move through the tissue of an animal, and it is able to pass between cells and separate cells from one another without actually slicing the cells in half. So we're talking like a high frequency laser, some sort of device that is able to separate cells from one another without causing any actual damage to the cells. It's really bizarre, and it would entirely explain why there's no blood. But, well, not entirely. It would partially explain the lack of blood, because there's no breaking of the cells. But again, it's just that characteristic, high strength.
it's not something that, yeah, it's not something that we use, or at least normally. The stuff that we know about
Exactly. I
anyway.
mean, there could be technology in a deep underground laboratory somewhere that is capable of producing similar effects, but there's nothing at civilian level to indicate that people are able to do that. So, I guess fast forwarding a little bit, one of the most significant events, I guess, that recorded in the hunt for the Skinwalker, is an event where they encounter a creature, which is this large cat-like looking creature. It's almost entirely obscured in shadows, which is terrorizing the so I believe it was the horses or the cattle on the ranch anyway. Now they give chase. They chase the thing to the woods, and Terry Sherman shoots it several times. The NIDS team is there. Now I guess we're to us, you know, and this is where, for me personally, it kind of breaks down because you have a bunch of scientists that are gone off chasing what appears to be this terrifying monster across this ranch and into the woods. They shoot the thing. However, there's no video or photographs or anything. Even if you weren't able to get a photograph of this thing,
Maybe just a photograph of them in the
or
act of it.
a video of the actual chase. I would assume that if I was a scientist on a remote ranch that was filled with paranormal activity, I think I would have a video camera to try to document as the events as empirically as possible. I mean, you can't lie.
Yeah, I think I'd have a group of people, actually, a couple people on cameras, a couple people on the microphones, like good microphones and cameras, everything else at all times. Because I mean that's what I mean. You're there to capture something that you don't know when it's going to happen or if it's going to happen, but you need to be ready for if it do, because there's no way to plan it. You can't say, okay, Tuesday night we're gonna, you don't look for it. It happens and you catch it or
Yeah.
you don't, right?
So, I mean, these events, the few events that we're going to talk about here, like I said, occurred over a 6-year period. And I guess after a while of them being on the ranch and that was being the most outrageous thing that had happened since they were there. They were attempting to. They were thinking that they could reach out to the event and try to start something. And I guess a couple of the scientists, they're very aware of the previous events that had happened. I mean, Terry Sherman had completely debriefed them, were to assume, as to the events that had occurred. And one particular event involved some young guy from California or something. Drove up to the ranch and said that he wanted to meditate on the ranch.
Now, this story, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this happened before Nid showed
This did
up.
happen before NIDS showed up. However, NIDS used it as a basis for the one of the research experiments that they tried. And so this guy goes to the ranch. He spends some time meditating, and while he is, Terry and his son are standing nearby, and they see this distortion appear in the middle of the field, and it kind of begins moving across the field, directly at this guy who's sitting there with his eyes closed, his legs crossed in a tantric position. And this distortion, it's about 7 or 8 feet tall. It looks like a heat wave moving through the air across the ground, and it runs right up to this meditating this guy who's meditating there, and before Terry is able to warn him, this thing runs right up on this kid and screams in his face. This horrible mix of, like, a dragon and a lion and a bear and just this terrible unearthly sound. And this guy, of course, jumps up, screams, is terrified, turns into a blubbering, crying mess.
Yeah, I believe he jumped up in Terry's arms, and he had to, or he hugged him or wouldn't
Yeah, he wouldn't let
let
him
go
go.
or something.
Terry apparently had to threaten to punch him if he didn't let him go. And so with that story, I guess after this big dry spell, the NIDS team decides that or at least two of the guys, while they're out doing their doing this night watch, I guess. One of the, I believe, physicists decides that he wants to do a little experiment of his own, climbs down, sits in the middle of this field, and begins to meditate. And, now, according to the book, they said that they found that over the years that meditation sometimes activated the phenomenon. However, they don't really cover what these other events are in the book. So at this point, they're already been on the ranch for a couple of years, and it's about 2:30 in the morning, and they one guy sitting there meditating, and and then after 5 or 6 hours, they call it a night. They begin to disassemble their equipment when they notice a light. There's a very faint light, yellowish color that begins flickering way down in this field where he was sitting, and as they're watching it, they think that it's getting brighter and brighter, so they bust out their, I think they say it's a Generation 3 night vision binoculars, and as soon as he begins looking through the binoculars, apparently the light wasn't just this little yellow, like dirty yellow point of light that seemed to be expanding or growing. But according to the guy with the binoculars, he could see a tunnel that appeared to be leading away. And while he's watching, and I guess this
This was one of the craziest stories, if I recall.
yeah, while he's watching through the binoculars, he's like hyperventilating. He's like, "Oh my God." He begins to describe a faceless, completely black entity.
It was a shadow. It was like a shadow being of a human being. It was completely shadow.
And it begins crawling out of this tunnel on its elbows and its knees, and it's shuffling out until it drops down onto the ground, and then it runs off into the night, and he loses sight of it.
Now that would scare the shit out of me, personally.
I think I would be on the first plane back to Las Vegas. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, before we go any further, because this is like, to me, is one of my favorite parts. We're going to take a short break, and during the break, I'm going to play In Tongues by me, Door to Anima. If you like that, you can also check out my website at www.doortoanima.com. That said, I hope you enjoy. All my life I've been blind to you, looking vainly for some signs from you. I need to know that something's there. There's something bright for me. I need to know why you have chosen now to end my life. without a voice to reason. God speak to me. I can hear death creeping up on me. All these loose ends seems unfair to me. Is this just random events, or was this planned for me? How do you measure the pain and pleasure you give to us? I feel my body turning down. New perspectives clouds my eyes. Black and white starts to run. My whole life told in tongues. And God said to me, I've been hiding who I am from you. It may seem selfish and unfair to you, but to show you what you can't understand will just get you running from me. And that certainly would not be fair to me. And now we're back. I hope you enjoyed that. And again, if you did, the song was called In Tongues by Door to Anima, aka me. And if you want to stream the rest of the album or whatever, go to www.doortoanima.com. That's DOORTOANIMA.com. You can also buy the song on iTunes and various other online retailers. And with that said, we're back. And so, Ryan, we were talking about the shadow being that crawled out of the tunnel of light.
So yeah, the two NIDS researchers, they done a little stakeout. One of them meditated, and after an hour of meditation, as they're leaving, this tunnel seemed to appear just hanging in the air, a couple of feet off the ground. To the human eye, it appeared as a dirty splash of yellow light way down in this field. However, to the Generation 3 night vision goggles, they seen this tunnel from which a strange shadow being with no face crawled out and dropped onto the ground, only to run off into the night. So, this here you've characterized, two events. Now, there was also another event where they chased some other animals, a strange-looking creature, chased it with a vehicle, and the thing just disappeared in the middle of a field.
They also told a story, and this wasn't in the book. I believe this was actually in their YouTube video.
The Coast to Coast AM interview?
I believe so. I could be wrong, but I believe that's where I heard it. But I feel like they were, because they were interviewing the Utes and like the community while they were there for any information on strange phenomena. And I recall at least one story that they were talking about, and I don't think they were there for that. This was told to them. But like one woman, she heard something, in her front yard. Like I think it was her dog or something like that. and she opened the door, and there was a shadow being, and it had like a dog's, like, I don't know if it was her dog or someone else's, but I believe it was a dog's head, like severed, and he was holding it in his hand. So the shadow being, just for reference, is like the same shape as a human. It's just completely black. It's like a shadow. And I believe after she screamed or freaked out, her husband ran out with a gun, and this thing took off running across the yards, and there was no footprints, no anything, and it got away, it disappeared, but nevertheless, it was still really strange. And just like that, I believe they told a story where there were these two beings. It looked like humans, but they had dogs' heads, and they were smoking cigars. And that sounds batshit crazy. It sounds like a comic book kind of a thing, but you have to remember, if you remember the definition for a skinwalker, the whole idea is that they can change form to any animal. So I guess they can change, probably into partial animals, partial something else or
Hybrid
whatever.
human animal
Yeah.
forms. Well, I mean, the Skinwalker Ranch, it is the center, the hotbed of all this different. I mean, we're talking about events, and that was what I guess the problem with NIDS and the way that they approached it was that they experienced events like that, where there were what looked to be an RV flying through the sky, what looked to be a flying refrigerator with lights on it, dog-headed people smoking cigars, Bigfoot sightings, giant animals that looked like they were a mix between a giant wolf and a hyena and a fox.
Now, in their defense, though, they do have a couple of pictures, of lights in particular on their website, skinwalkerranch.org. Now, as you would imagine, I mean, they're not really great, clear pictures. They never are with paranormal for whatever reason. But I do remember seeing some with some strange lights and stuff like that
Now,
there.
skinwalkerranch.org, is that site run? Who operates that? I think that is a privately run website that is not affiliated with NIDS in any way, shape, or form. Is it not?
Well, I can't remember for sure, but I know that if you go searching for anything on the Skinwalker Ranch, that one is probably the most that I came across. Then again, it's kind of a hard subject to find. Now they do have, like I said, like they mentioned, Bob Bigelow and stuff like that. I don't know. You'd have to look at it. I can't remember.
Because as far as I know, the NIDS organization is now actually defunct.
Yeah, I believe that's true too. But geez, I can't remember where I was going with that.
So, so to
Carry on.
continue with the events as unfolded after NIDS took over the property, as characterized in the book, there's a decline in activity, and though they have strange encounters with weird animals, strange lights in the sky. There's one event where one of their physicists is contacted. He was momentarily, and this is of his own account, that his mind was momentarily taken over by a foreign intelligence.
So while that happened, he was still aware, though. He was aware that
He
it
was
was
aware that it
happening.
was happening. This was actually while they were searching for this creature in the trees. There was this large, another one of these large cat-like beasts
Yeah.
which they characterized as being extremely, this thing got to be several hundred pounds, very big, it very nimble, very fast, very stealthy, and obviously intelligent. And it watched them from the trees. Terry Sherman shot it, and they actually did find some partial clawed footprints, but only a very few. That was a constant theme with all these events, and what I'm trying to illustrate is that the events as a whole were so varied and so almost none of them repeated themselves more than once or twice.
So they couldn't really set up for it. I remember them making a point of that in the book. It was like, how do you set up for something that only happens once or twice,
Exactly, and I
right?
think the problem with NIDS is that they approached it from a scientific point of view, using using the scientific method to gather information and formulate a hypothesis off of empirical data, when they should have approached it in a counter espionage type of approach. Because all the information that we have from this event and at this point, I personally am at the point with the Skinwalker phenomenon to say that there is a intelligence involved. Now, whether it's a human or non-human intelligence, I mean, that's up for debate. But there is an intelligence involved. I think one of the most poignant examples of that would be Terry and his wife Ellen are walking by. They're walking together. This is before they sold the ranch. They're walking together side by side, and they look over at a small pen of their prize Angus cattle, and Ellen makes the comment that, Terry, if I don't know what I do if we ever lost those cows. I mean, though they are, each animal was thousands of dollars, and basically represented, the collection of their like their life's work, their life's fortune had gone into these top grade A cattle. And they continue on their walk, and then about 15 minutes later they come back, and Ellen just screams. She just and the cattle are all gone.
That would be something like,
Now
yeah.
the actually I'm incorrect here, because I said this was before NIDS had bought the ranch. No, this actually happened while NIDS had acquired the ranch, and it was characterized as one of the few times that Ellen returned to the ranch after they had sold it. But it was before they had moved their cattle off of it completely. Now, what happened? They started a frantic search. The cattle were nowhere to be seen. The gates were all locked, and they began searching everywhere for their cattle. They find them unharmed, except Terry walks up to the trailer, or walks up to a old camper trailer that was left on the property, sitting on the property. The doors had been chained shut, and had just been left there. And I believe it was 5 or 6 fully grown Black Angus bulls were trapped in this trailer, and they were
So
all wedged in there side by side. Just he was completely just floored at how they had possibly gotten in there. And when he first walked up and looked at them, they were all in there completely unmoving, not making any sound, almost like the animals were in a trance. They were in a daze. and just he just banged on the side of the trailer to see if they would and immediately it's like they woke out of the stupor and they begin freaking out, right, because they're trapped in this little confined space, and within the matter of a couple of moments they managed to completely just destroy the inside of this trailer until Terry can get the door open and get them out. So,
So we're saying basically that whatever this thing is was listening to whatever Ellen said, about if we lost these
and
cows,
reacted almost immediately to that.
like
Yeah,
playing with them. And again, this is something. Well, I mean, we can rule out human presence. I mean, what human do we know that we can do that in that short of time? In an abandoned, locked up
well, and
trailer.
that was the thing, was that the chain was still locked across the door. So, immediately, Terry calls NIDS and gets them back onto the ranch because though people did stay there for long periods of time, it wasn't, they weren't there permanently. And at times they would leave, and then Terry would phone them and bring them back when things were getting weird again. So they did come in. They checked the corral. They did find, I do believe, that part of the corral in one corner was highly magnetized, but it very quickly like dissipated in like in that property. And they did document that what the inside of the trailer was destroyed. It was covered with cow dung, and they were completely at a loss. I mean, what category does that event go into? Is that a UFO? Is that paranormal? Is that cryptozoological? Is that, where does that
Well,
fall?
that's exactly what makes Skinwalker Ranch so interesting. Is that when you talk about paranormal activity, it's almost always a ghost. It's almost like my house is haunted, my fridge is haunted. Like it's the same. Not that it's not interesting. Sometimes it can be, but it's something that as far as paranormal is concerned, it's like mainstream paranormal, right? And here we have something that is totally off that beaten path.
Exactly.
You
It's
know,
so far off the beaten path that it's almost absurd. We have dog-headed people smoking cigars. We have uh, uh, and I mean just the sheer volume of activity and anomalies, I guess is the best way to put it. Is it's almost off-putting to even the most open-minded amongst us.
well,
It's so non-specific that it almost seems made up.
now we know that Skinwalker Ranch is private land,
It
right?
is still privately owned by
By
Robert
someone.
Bigelow.
Okay, well, in any case, I've come across threads of groups of people who have gotten together for an excursion on the ranch, like illegal as it may be. Their whole idea to go in there and see what they could find. And I've come across threads, and I won't say where. It's on the internet of people who have gone in there and have found, they've taken photos too of like an animal that looked like a mix between a fox and a wolf,
With the bright,
which they
the bushy, bright orange tail.
yes, and in fact that was one of their points with the photo is that they believe that was a skinwalker, and they've also reported in certain areas hearing a really low pitch hum, like but loud though. Like it wasn't
It
a
was a low
subtle.
frequency, but very
Yeah, it
loud.
was a very
Now,
deep.
and I mean that was something that was characterized. Terry and his family experienced on several different occasions loud metallic banging and clanging. This that would just it just sounded like it was coming from the sky right above them. Sometimes they would hear what sounded like drilling and or machines that were, and the sound was very clear but muffled, and it sounded like and it was like coming from beneath the ground. That if you got close to the ground, you could hear that it was coming from the ground. So there is
Well,
a very long history of documented, or well, there at least a history of documented anomalous sounds like that.
well, here's a question. So Robert Bigelow still owns the land. It's
As
still
far as
private,
as far as
right?
I'm aware, yes.
Okay, and so, as far as we know, the experience, like the phenomenon of stuff like that has died down. He's a millionaire, billionaire, so he obviously doesn't live there. He's probably not using it, so he really has no use for the land, but yet he keeps it, which makes me think, well, is he not doing anything on the land, or perhaps they have some secret
Well, I
investigations?
mean, who is this Robert Bigelow fellow, right? I mean, Bigelow is notoriously difficult to get any information on. He shies away from media attention. He refuses to have his photos taken by the press. You know, he doesn't do interviews. Apparently, he doesn't even use email. Right, like
Well,
this guy is as low key as you can get. Now, and we're talking about an entrepreneur who owns an aerospace industry and casinos and a scientific organization. Now, also, he concluded a deal with the MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, where he gained access to their entire database of UFO files. And I mean, aside from NIDS, MUFON is probably the best organized UFO investigation organization out there.
so what we're talking about is a guy who has got a lot of interest for the paranormal and a lot of funds to acquire stuff
Unlimited
that the
resources.
normal.
We're talking unlimited
Yeah.
resources, unprecedented in the anomalous research world, whether it be cryptozoology, UFOlogy, or paranormal studies, parapsychology. Um, he's actually a member of a member of MUFON. He's on their board. He's one of the board of directors. Um, he funded the chair of consciousness studies at the University of Nevada. So he's involved in a lot of this stuff. Now, I've also read that there's links to him with CIA, FBI, NSA, other possible shadowy organizations. Ultimately, what are his motives? What are his, what is he looking to achieve with this information? He looks to be acquiring, um, you know, paranormal research information and data at a phenomenal rate. Right now, Robert Bigelow is probably the most informed human being, private individual on this planet when it comes to paranormal UFOlogy research.
So to sit down and have a conversation with him would probably be, for a paranormal fan, would be unprecedented and what you could learn.
Most definitely, most definitely. And I guess it's interesting to note that the NIDS only bought this after it became a very after the media circus began. And I mean, so you had a smaller UFO organizations who had picked up on this story about the Skinwalker and the Skinwalker Ranch long before NIDS ever got there. However, they only became interested in the ranch after a media circus started about on the whole thing. And I guess interesting to note is that later you have they actually hired some remote viewers to do some remote viewing about the events on the ranch and what that could possibly mean. And several of the remote viewers actually talked about military operations, people in black uniforms, tactical uniforms, um, an electronic grid. That was remote viewed. That was buried underneath the ranch. So I mean, is the government does the government have some kind of system buried in the ground there? But there was links with the remote viewers made links to some of these alphabet boy organizations, NSA, FBI, CIA, DARPA, all these different groups. There were links made. So you have NIDS buys this property. After they buy it, they kick out all the other UFO organizations. There's no communication there's no information being released then, because now it's privately owned. Terry Sherman is, as part of this whole deal, he has to sign a non-disclosure agreement.
So, like, I mean, well, if they're keeping it secret, one has to wonder. I mean, every time it comes down to secretive, stuff in this caliber, the first thing I think of is technology, right? If there's some kind of it reminds me actually of Roswell. Like a UFO, I believe, crashed. It was like in Canada, and the U.S. came across our border, took it, and then it was a downed weather balloon, right? Right after it was in the news and disclosed that it was a UFO,
Yeah.
right? Probably the most famous, obvious lie. Like everybody knows it wasn't a weather balloon, but
Yeah.
whatever, right?
Well, especially after they said that the reason people thought there were alien bodies was because there were crash test dummies that were used, and
Yeah.
that was the most telling, I think, because the crash test dummies that they used, that they dropped from weather balloons, they did do that, but that wasn't done until that program didn't start until 5 years after the Roswell event. So you have some very blaring inconsistencies in the official government story that just but what we have to, I guess, what we have to really remember here is that we're talking information, different disinformation, espionage, and counter espionage, right? Admittedly, UFO organizations, MUFON, probably the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, BFRO, all the paranormal and UFO research organizations in North America, and perhaps abroad as well. Every single one of them are infiltrated with or by intelligence operatives
Disinfo.
of one from one organization or another. There are special interest groups who know about some of this stuff, at least have some information on this stuff, and that they try very hard to seed bad information. The CIA admitted this. Like, I mean, we have retired FBI, CIA who have come out and have stated this for a fact. We seeded disinformation and UFO organizations. We have disinformation agents in UFO organizations who are always spreading disinformation. It's this constant flow of espionage against the public. Because obviously, because these organizations begin the hit around the truth. We must have been beginning to hit around the truth.
So more or less, it's a way to ruin any credibility.
Ruin the
So
credibility, to throw off, to get people going down a certain road. I mean, UFOs today are considered, nuts and bolts craft that are piloted by squishy beings like you and me, right? Blood and flesh and blood creatures. That is the UFO vision that is pounded into each and every one of our heads. If even as a member of the mutual UFO network, if you go outside of that, you become ostracized by an already marginalized group, right? Because you are leaving the realm of what they consider to be acceptable. They believe in flesh and blood alien beings, but they're not going to go down the path and say, well, beings of light and energy flying around in ships made of light, light ships and light beings of pure thought and emotion. That becomes too wishy-washy for them. So, that could very well be the truth of the matter. The truth of the matter could be that physically traveling across space just takes too much time. It's actually easier to cross dimensions and visit here from other planes of existence, where we've all heard stories of little weird fairy-like UFOs or fairy-like aliens that have appeared, the hillbillies who have in turn shot them with their shotguns and rifles, and were only knocked down or seemingly weren't affected. Bigfoot doesn't seems to be bulletproof too, doesn't he?
yeah, well, I mean, I believe that they said Bigfoot. Some people believe Bigfoot or Sasquatch to be a skinwalker.
Or
Now,
well, the Native Americans, all the different Native American tribes, not all of them, but a large majority of them, refer to Bigfoot as as the Earth brother. He's the husband to the planet. He is the brother of man. He's the old man that lives in the mountain and who tells us when we're not living in accordance with nature. He is not he's not a spirit, but he's not completely part of this world either. He's something in between. So, and we've seen a lot of this same activity on Skinwalker Ranch. Strange creatures that seem to be bulletproof, bizarre animals like giant wolves and bizarre
and of
hybrids
course with the shadow people, we have people who are here but not quite here.
that are here, who are invisible, but who are visible on infrared heat sensitive cameras. So this idea of a parallel reality, a parallel dimension, the intermingling of CIA, FBI, shadowy government organizations, perhaps splinter cell military organizations. We have shadowy private individuals, very Robert Bigelow, this entrepreneur who shows up almost out of nowhere, throwing money at the paranormal research end of things, and almost becoming like the Bill Gates of the paranormal world, where he has acquired all of the actual physical financial assets in terms of these paranormal organizations. I mean, he runs MUFON. MUFON does not get new equipment unless they do what Robert Bigelow says. I mean, there's accounts that he uses. He uses campaigns of fear against people. He'll send people to intimidate you. He gets what he wants. I mean, I'm not saying that all this is true, but again, you have an individual who's not willing to speak to the press. He's out there making changes. He's acquiring organizations. He's running aerospace industries. but he's not willing to talk to the public. He's not willing to
Yeah.
make anything of himself known. And not that you know myself in his position saying that I wouldn't perhaps be the same way, but it doesn't lend itself to an individual who I guess you would assume who's a truth seeker. He's spending all his personal fortune to try to find the truth about UFOs and paranormal activity.
Well, hell, I think I'd be the same way. I mean, we all like to say that, yeah, if you knew the answer to blah blah blah, you tell everybody. But you know what? I mean, truth be told, if I knew the answer for some really really top secret stuff, I probably wouldn't tell anybody because I'd probably disappear,
Well,
right?
like personally, I think there are some links between him and some of these other shadowy organizations. But who's to really say? At the end of the day, we're left with a defunct organization who has acquired probably one of the most bizarre parcels of land, pieces of property that anyone could ever own in North America.
And this is just the stuff that we know,
And yeah,
right?
the events that we've talked about here today are it's just what officially NIDS has said. And I mean, as I've tried to play devil's advocate a little bit here and point out that may not necessarily, and most likely is not the only. I mean, some of the people that we heard about and that we read about in the Hunt for the Skinwalker. I believe the role of Colm Keller was greatly underplayed in the book. Some sources put him as a major player. A guy who a molecular biologist, PhDs in biochemistry. He's an intelligent human being. He actually worked in Canada, worked for the Terry Fox Laboratory, and he both worked in British Columbia and Ontario. He's intelligent, a very well educated individual, and he was like acted as a team leader and a project manager for the NIDS team. However, in the book, he's not really portrayed as a big we don't see that structure, right?
Well, maybe that's because he's also one of the authors, so maybe he kind of downplayed himself, or like told a story more from stuff that he was aware of, or rather than putting in his whole role, so to say.
Perhaps, but there's a lot to be said for each and every one of us to really, I encourage everybody to read Hunt for the Skinwalker and to go out and to listen to the interviews of Coast to Coast AM. Go to skinwalkerranch.org. Listen to our podcasts. Get as much information as you can.
Oh yeah, hell, Google it. Like, it's not the easiest thing to find a lot of information on, but it's certainly, again, why we even did this podcast is that is one of the most interesting places for paranormal stories. And anyway, with that having been said, we are out of time, but we have some ideas for some really, really interesting stories coming up. So be sure to check back for that. And again, if you have any questions you'd like us to answer on the show, or topics you'd like us to discuss or research, again, you can send that to will@effedupstories.com or ryan@effedupstories.com. Visit our website at www.effedupstories.com. That's EFFEDUPSTORIES.com. And if you have stories paranormal, pictures, videos, whatever, send that to us too, and we'll post it on the site. And with that said, that's enough for me. My name is Will Pender. I hope you enjoyed the show. Cheers.